Normally when you make a video about something, you realize all the things you could have talked about immediately after releasing it. Or when you read the comments. But this time, that happened while I was editing, which has to be some kind of new record. In retrospect though, my thoughts on the topic wouldn't have helped in explaining the thesis of why Mario bosses suck sometimes, since what I really wanted to do was examine something with the groundwork that video set up. So I recommend watching that first and coming back here if you haven't seen it yet. Back when I was editing, I had a weekend with nothing to do, so I blasted through VVV, VVV, and Sonic Mania. While both of them were pretty good, one has a major flaw that dragged down the game by a mile for me. Sonic Mania has some of the worst boss fights and boss fight structure in any platformer I've ever played. Which is saying a lot, considering that most of them already do a pretty bad job. For the most part, Sonic Mania's bosses replicate both sins I complained about in the last video. They don't involve platforming, and instead utilize the standard action game boss model of trying to attack the boss to lower its health while defending your own, except for the first Egg Robo Battle and Metal Sonic. Oh, and there's also this one Puyo Puyo fight? I have no idea where that came from. In addition, they rarely incorporate and iterate on the ideas of the zone leading up to them. Both of these flaws already make the bosses of countless other platformers feel disconnected from the rest of their respective games, so this by itself isn't a unique criticism. But Sonic in particular didn't mesh with this formula in a number of other ways that stand out. Sonic Mania has 12 zones, each of which is divided into a first and second act. Both acts have checkpoints sprinkled throughout them so that when you die, you only lose a life and go back to the last one, rather than restarting entirely. However, if you do lose all your lives, you will have to start the whole zone over. At first, it seems like a completely fine structure. It makes lives actually important without being too punishing, giving value to rings, which act as a health system and collectibles simultaneously, and pushes players to play zones multiple times, potentially coming across the parts that they initially missed, since there are so many interconnected paths. I might have put permanent checkpoints at the beginning of each act rather than each zone, but there are enough pros and cons to both approaches that it's not a huge deal. Overall, the system and structure design of Sonic Mania was pretty well tailored to suit a Sonic platforming game. But remember, Sonic Mania doesn't only have platforming. It also has this. By themselves, Sonic Mania's bosses are bad, and its structure is pretty good. But when you throw them together, it frankly creates an abomination in video game form. Resetting to the beginning of a zone after missing a jump or hitting a hazard feels fair, because that's what you've been practicing at. But when you've been improving your platforming skills throughout the entire game and have to restart because you couldn't kill a gigantic robotic spider, that's just punishing. Which is a bad experience by itself, but also nullifies one of the main benefits of the restart system. Dying unfairly can feel like your time exploring has been wasted, and players may not want to get burned again, so they're incentivized to take the path they already know, getting to the boss as quickly as possible, rather than finding interesting new routes. The ring system doesn't mesh with the boss fights very well either. When you get hit, you can lose vast amounts of rings at once if you have a lot stored up. Which works because you're constantly collecting rings as you lose them. When a boss fight starts though, there's typically very few rings lying around. You're still losing the same amount of them regardless of whether you're platforming or fighting, but now each time that you get hit, those rings that you lost are permanently gone for the rest of the attempt. This results in a massive distinction between your first attempt, or the first one after you die and restart if you're a bad Vigi gamer such as myself, and the subsequent ones. You might come into a boss fight with 50 rings, but if you die and go back to the checkpoint, you're only going to have the 3 or so that the game gives you in the short run up to the boss, creating a massive disparity in the amount of hits you can take between attempts. If you're designing a boss fight, you have to have a general idea of what kind of health pool the player might have in order to hit a good sweet spot of length and challenge. Once this much variation is introduced, it's nearly impossible to balance a boss for both of two radically different starting positions, so they either have to feel like a punishing slog in one scenario, or a trivial encounter in the other. In normal Sonic gameplay, the player is presented with a constant conflict. They have to carefully platform while also trying to build momentum to go as fast as possible. So aside from the core gameplay differences between the bosses and the rest of the game we've already gone over, traditional bosses also ignore Sonic's core identity. When you're stuck in an area with an enemy and just have to hit it enough to make it die, there's no acceleration or build-up, which is what Sonic's whole moveset was made for. When Sonic was first introduced in the 90s, the biggest difference between this and this was that one has you holding down the run button to go a bit faster, while the other will shoot you at lightning speed at any opportunity. There's a reason that the moveset change people were most excited for before Sonic Mania released was the drop dash, because it lets you burst out at a high speed without losing momentum and coming to a halt if you know what you're doing. Sonic is a constant balancing act between speed and precision, with interesting risk-reward calculations that come as a result, and its bosses throw that core appeal in the garbage. None of this is to say that Sonic Mania is a bad game or that you shouldn't play it. In many ways, it's the reverse of Super Hot Mind Control Elite, which I talked about in my first video essay that you definitely should not watch. It's really bad. Upgrading stats and weapons is cool, but that alone won't keep me engaged. I've always thought... But the gist of it was that Super Hot Mind Control Elite's interesting mini roguelike structure was its saving grace, considering that the core gameplay wasn't innovative anymore. It was a mediocre game with one really good element that made it worth your while. Sonic Mania, on the other hand, is a fantastic game in most regards, with incredibly polished level design that reuses the past effectively, but it has one huge black mark on its record that brings it down quite a lot. I'd still be more likely to recommend Sonic Mania, but I do have one request. If any of you are more experienced PC gamers than myself and know how the hell to mod Sonic Mania, can you show me how to remove the boss fights? And if you happen to work at Sega, maybe share this video with some of the developers on the next 2D Sonic game. Just a suggestion. Another thanks to Dizak1. It may not be much, but it's really gratifying to know that people like the stuff you've made enough to voluntarily pay for it. Patreon supporters get access to video essays 1 week early, I'll put your name in the credits, and I'll put up a Q&A post ahead of each video coming out, so if I get any questions in the comments, I'll answer one of them at the end. Depending on how I feel about any particular upcoming video, I might even put up a small portion early as a sneak peek like I did with the last one. If you just want to know how the next project is moving along though, all development update posts are publicly accessible. I've also launched a Discord server, but until it gets bigger and becomes more active, or active at all, everything on it's going to be public. If you want to support me and get any patron exclusive benefits, you can subscribe for just $1 per video.